2 days after I gave birth to my daughter, my father-in-law walked into my hospital room with a briefcase, a notary, and my husband's girlfriend. I want you to sit with that for a second. I had just had a C-section. I had a catheter still in. My daughter was 17 hours old and sleeping in a bassinet 3 feet away from me, and the first thing my father-in-law said when he walked through that door was, "We need to wrap this up before you're discharged." His name is Conrad, 64 years old, founder of a regional real estate development firm that operates across 6 states in the Southeast. The kind of man who has a different handshake for different people, firm for equals, two-handed for people he needs something from, limp and distracted for people he's already decided don't matter. I had been getting the limp one for the 4 years I was married to his son. His son! My husband. Nolan. Nolan was standing in the corner of the room with his arms crossed, not looking at me. He was looking at his phone. I remember that specifically. The blue light from his screen reflecting off his jaw while his father laid documents on the rolling tray table they use for hospital meals, while the notary set up her stamp kit next to my water pitcher. While the woman Nolan had been seeing for at least 8 months stood near the window in a camel coat, holding her own purse with both hands like she was waiting for a bus. Her name, I would later learn from a court filing, was Jessa. I looked at my daughter in her bassinet. She had her fist pressed against her cheek and her eyes were moving under her eyelids, dreaming maybe at 17 hours old. I don't know if newborns dream. I don't know a lot of things I thought I knew that week. "What is this?" I said. Not a question. I already understood what it was. Conrad placed his hand flat on the stack of documents. "Nolan and Jessa are expecting. The timing is what it is. We'd like to settle this cleanly and quickly, and we're prepared to be very generous." I looked at Nolan. He looked at his phone. "How generous?" I said. $2 million. Conrad slid the top document toward me. "Full and final settlement. You keep the car, we keep the house. You'll receive child support as required by Georgia law, and visitation will be structured but reasonable." I looked at the number on the document. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the woman in the camel coat. "Structured but reasonable," I repeated. "We feel that's fair given the circumstances." I had been a licensed estate planning attorney for 6 years. I had drafted more settlement agreements than I could count. I had sat across tables from men like Conrad Whitfield dozens of times, and I knew, with a precision that had nothing to do with emotion, exactly what was in that document without reading past the first page. I also knew what wasn't in it. "I'll need to review this with my own counsel," I said. Conrad's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. "Of course, we'd appreciate a decision within 72 hours. He picked up the briefcase. He nodded at the notary. He walked toward the door and stopped, and without turning around, he said, "The offer reflects our belief that a clean separation is in everyone's best interest, including the child's." Then he left. The notary left. Jessa left last, and she glanced at my daughter on her way out. A quick glance, a fraction of a second, and then she was gone. Nolan put his phone in his pocket. "I'm sorry," he said, and I genuinely could not tell if he meant it. "Please leave," I said. He left. I pressed the call button for the nurse, and when she came in, I asked her to please make sure my room was not accessible to anyone except my mother and my sister and the medical staff. She looked at my face and then at the documents on the tray table, and she said, "Yes, ma'am." And she meant it. Then I was alone with my daughter, and I let myself cry for exactly 15 minutes, because 15 minutes was all I could afford. My name is Lauren. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in Decatur, Georgia, which is just east of Atlanta, in a house my parents rented for 22 years before they finally bought it. My father drove a delivery truck for a plumbing supply company. My mother worked the front desk at a pediatric dentist's office for 18 years. They were not wealthy. They were careful. There is a difference. I got a full academic scholarship to the University of Georgia, and then a partial scholarship to Emory Law, which I supplemented with loans and waitressing 3 nights a week. I passed the bar on my first attempt. I joined a mid-size estate planning firm in Buckhead, and I was good at my job in a quiet way that meant partners trusted me with complicated family situations. Second marriages, contested inheritances, blended families with competing interests and old grievances. I was good at finding the places where documents said one thing and people assumed another. I met Nolan at a charity gala for a children's hospital where we'd both been dragged by separate mutual friends. He was charming in the way that men for money sometimes are. Not showy, but comfortable, the way someone is comfortable in a room when they've never had reason to feel otherwise. We dated for 2 years and got married at a venue in Alpharetta, and I wore a dress that cost more than my first car, and I thought I was happy. I think I was happy for a while. Then I was not. But the not happy crept in so slowly I kept mistaking it for normal. Nolan worked in acquisitions at his father's firm, Conrad Whitfield Development Group, had built the company from a single strip mall in Gainesville, Georgia, in the late 80s into something that managed commercial and residential properties across Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, and Florida. The family money was real, and it was old enough to have opinions. Conrad's wife, Nolan's mother, was a woman named Patricia who had died of ovarian cancer 3 years before I came into the picture. Nolan didn't talk about her much, except to say she was the glue, and from what I pieced together over 4 years, I believe that was accurate. Without her, the family had a center missing. Nolan's sister Elise was the only Whitfield I genuinely liked. She was 2 years older than Nolan, had left Atlanta for Seattle in her late 20s, and ran a landscape architecture practice. She called her father Conrad to his face and texted me on my birthday without being reminded. When I was 8 months pregnant, she flew down for a weekend, and we spent one whole afternoon assembling a crib and talking about nothing in particular. And I remember thinking, this is the family I thought I was marrying into. The morning after Conrad's visit to the hospital, Elise called me. I just found out, she said. I'm so sorry. I want you to know I didn't know, and I want you to know that what they did was disgusting. I know you didn't know, I said. What are you going to do? I'm going to do what I'm good at, I said. There was a brief silence, and then she said, good. I was discharged 4 days after my C-section. My mother had come down from Decatur and was staying at my apartment. I had moved out of the house Nolan and I shared 3 months into the pregnancy, which is its own story. The short version being that I had found a receipt I wasn't meant to find, and I decided to take my time deciding what to do about it. I knew, vaguely, that Nolan had been seeing someone. I did not know she was pregnant too until I was lying in a hospital bed with my own newborn daughter, and his father put documents in front of me. My mother took my daughter, and I took the documents to my dining room table with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee, and I read every word. Conrad was not stupid. He had hired good lawyers. The settlement was technically legal and procedurally clean and structured in a way that looked generous on the surface. $2 million is not a small amount of money. It was also, as I saw immediately, about $18 million less than what I was entitled to under Georgia marital property law, given what I knew about the assets Nolan held in both individual and joint capacity, including 2 properties that had been transferred to an LLC 3 months after we separated. A transfer that, if examined closely, looked a great deal like dissipation of marital assets. I also noted that the child support calculation in the proposed agreement used Nolan's base salary as the income figure, not his total compensation, including annual distributions from the family LLC he had been receiving since he turned 25. Those distributions averaged, in the 3 years I had access to the household finances, somewhere between $380,000 and $420,000 per year. The document asked me to sign away my right to discovery. I wrote 3 pages of notes. Then I called my colleague Marcus, who is a litigator, and has the kind of disposition that remains perfectly pleasant right up until the moment it becomes very, very useful to his clients. Tell me everything, Marcus said. I told him everything. They showed up at the hospital, he said flatly when I finished. With the notary and the girlfriend, yes. There was a pause. Lauren, he said, I'm going to need you to let me enjoy this for a second. I told him to take his time. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of my life, and I want to be honest about that, because I think there's a version of this story where I present myself as someone who had everything under control, who was 3 steps ahead the whole time, and that would be a lie. I was also a new mother running on broken sleep, healing from abdominal surgery, nursing a baby every 2.5 hours, and trying to hold myself together at a fundamental level. There were nights I sat on the bathroom floor while my daughter slept because I didn't want my mother to hear me crying. There was a Tuesday afternoon where I just stared at a wall for 40 minutes and didn't think anything at all. There were moments I picked up my daughter and held her and felt something so large and so terrifying. How much I loved her, how much I needed to get this right, that I had to sit down. But I also kept working, not because I'm made of steel, because it was the only thing that made sense to do. Marcus filed for full financial disclosure under Georgia's Domestic Relations Discovery Rules. We requested 5 years of tax returns, all LLC operating agreements, all property transfer records, all bank and investment account statements. We filed a motion questioning the legitimacy of the LLC transfer that had occurred 3 months post-separation. Conrad's lawyers responded within 48 hours, which told me they had been expecting a fight and had prepared for one. They sent a letter characterizing my discovery requests as harassment and bad faith litigation tactics. Marcus read the letter to me over the phone, and I could hear him almost smiling. "They're nervous," he said. "Good," I said. 2 weeks after we filed, Elise called me again. "Conrad asked me to talk to you," she said. "He wants to know if you're open to a revised offer." "What's the revised offer?" He didn't give me a number. He asked me to gauge his word was temperature. I thought about that for a moment. "Tell him my temperature is fine," I said. "Tell him I'm looking forward to the deposition." Elise was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll tell him exactly that." The deposition of Conrad Whitfield took place on a Wednesday morning in March, in a conference room on the 32nd floor of an office building in Midtown Atlanta. I was not present for it. Marcus handled it, but I had spent 2 weeks preparing every question. By that point, we had the financial records, all of them. And what they showed was not surprising to me because I had suspected it, but it was clarifying in the way that documentation always is. The LLC transfer had been executed in anticipation of divorce proceedings. The distributions to Nolan had been deliberately classified in a way that obscured them from the support calculation. There was also, buried in 3 years of records, a pattern of payments to a consulting firm that, when traced, turned out to be a company registered to Jess's home address in Smyrna. That last part, Nolan had been paying his girlfriend through a company account for at least 2 years. Marcus called me after the deposition. "Conrad is 64 years old and he has been deposed before and he still looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth," he said. "How long did it run?" 4 hours. His lawyers asked for a recess twice. I fed my daughter. She was 6 weeks old and had started smiling. Real smiles, not the reflex kind, and she smiled at me while I was on the phone with Marcus, and I thought about how she would never know any of this. How this was something I was doing around her, underneath her, like laying a foundation she'd never have to see. The settlement conference happened on a Thursday in April. Conrad came with 2 attorneys and a posture I recognized. The posture of someone who had decided to make a concession, and had already mentally reframed it as a strategic choice. Nolan sat at the far end of the table and did not look at me, which was fine. I didn't need him to. I sat next to Marcus and across from Conrad, and I thought about the woman in a camel coat standing in my hospital room while my daughter was 17 hours old, and I thought about Nolan staring at his phone, and I thought about Conrad saying, "We'd like to wrap this up," like my marriage was a meeting that had run long. Conrad's lead attorney opened with a new number, $8 million, full settlement, structured visitation, amended child support calculation that was still low but less obviously so. Marcus looked at me. I shook my head slightly. "Our position hasn't changed," Marcus said. "We're prepared to proceed to trial." Conrad looked at me directly for the first time that day. He had the same eyes as Nolan, pale gray, set back a little, and the expression in them was something I hadn't seen before from him. Not exactly respect. More like recalibration. "What does she want?" he said, to Marcus, but looking at me. "Full disclosure of all marital assets and LLC distributions for the duration of the marriage," Marcus said. "Child support calculated on total compensation. Primary physical custody. A share of the consulting payments made to the third party through company accounts. We'll be asking the court to characterize those as dissipation of marital assets and attorney's fees." Conrad was quiet for a moment. "That's aggressive," his attorney said. "We have the records," Marcus said pleasantly. "We're happy to let the court review them." There was a 20-minute recess. Conrad's team went into the hallway and I could hear, not words, but the cadence of an argument. One voice, steady. One voice elevated. When they came back, Conrad looked older than he had 20 minutes before. The final settlement took another 3 weeks to negotiate in full. When it was done, I received a cash settlement of just over $11 million. Child support calculated on Nolan's full documented compensation, which came to $6,400 per month. Primary physical custody of my daughter with a structured visitation schedule, and reimbursement of my legal fees in full. The consulting payments to Jess's company were addressed separately and quietly, in a way I agreed to keep confidential, in exchange for a number I will also keep confidential. I signed the final documents on a Friday afternoon. My mother drove me home, my daughter was asleep in her car seat, and my mother kept one hand on the wheel and one hand on mine the whole way. "Done?" my mother said. "Done," I said. I want to tell you what the months after that looked like, because I think the part of stories like this that gets skipped over is the ordinary part. And the ordinary part is actually where everything real happens. My daughter's name is June. I named her that because my mother's middle name is June, and because I wanted her to have something from the life I came from, not the life I had married into. She has Nolan's coloring, the gray eyes, the brown hair, and my expressions, or so my mother says. I went back to work when June was 4 months old, 3 days a week at first, then full-time by month 6. I am now a partner at a different firm, a smaller one that specializes in high-conflict family estates, which is, it turns out, a natural fit. I understand things about those cases now that I did not understand before, specifically what it costs a person to sit across a table from someone who is trying to reduce them to a number. Nolan and Jessa had their son in July. Nolan exercises his visitation consistently, which I will give him credit for. He's better as a visiting parent than he was as a husband, and June seems fine with him, which is what matters. We do not speak about anything except logistics. That works. Conrad retired from Whitfield Development Group 14 months after the settlement. I don't know if those things are related. I have my suspicions. Elise came to Atlanta for June's first birthday. She brought a wooden pull toy shaped like a duck and sat on my living room floor and let June use her lap as a surface for stacking blocks. She stays in our lives the way she says she always wanted to. Present, easy, genuinely herself. I think about what she said to me the morning after Conrad came to my hospital room. "I want you to know that what they did was disgusting." It's a small thing, maybe, to someone who doesn't know what it's like to be in that room, but I needed to hear it more than I could have told her at the time. The $2 million they offered me in that hospital room. I think about it sometimes, not with anger. The anger burned off a long time ago, more with a kind of flat clarity. They looked at me 2 days after I had given birth, and they saw a number. They thought the number was what I needed, and they thought the number was something they controlled. What they didn't account for was that I spend my professional life looking at numbers, and I know what they say, and I know what they hide. They had built an entire strategy on the assumption that grief and exhaustion and the weight of a newborn in your arms would make you too tired to read the footnotes. I read the footnotes. June just turned 14 months, and she is walking now. That wide-legged, top-heavy, determined walk that looks like she is crossing the deck of a ship in rough leather. She falls and looks surprised, and then gets back up. Every single time, she gets back up. Every single time, she gets back up. I don't know what she'll want to be when she grows up. I don't know what she'll face, or what will be unfair, or what will come at her in moments when she's too tired and too hurt to fight back. But I know she'll have a mother who stayed in the room when it was hard, who read every word, who didn't sign anything until she understood exactly what she was worth. That's the only inheritance I know how to leave her that actually matters. I thought a lot about the moment Conrad put that document on my hospital tray table. Not with bitterness, that's mostly gone now, but with the kind of quiet attention you give something that taught you something real. He made a calculation. He looked at a woman 2 days out of surgery holding a newborn, exhausted and blindsided, And he decided that was the right time to move. And in a way, he wasn't wrong to think it. Grief and shock and physical pain do make people sign things they shouldn't. It happens every day. He had seen it happen before, I'm sure, in business rooms, if not in hospital rooms. What he miscalculated was the specific woman in front of him. I don't say that to congratulate myself. I say it because I think there's something true in it about the way consequences actually work, not as punishment handed down from somewhere, but as the natural result of choices made, compounding quietly over time. Conrad spent decades building a life around the idea that leverage was everything, that the right pressure at the right moment could move anyone. That money was the language all conversations eventually came down to. Those beliefs didn't fail him in that hospital room because the universe decided to correct him. They failed him because they were never fully true, and I was the wrong person to test them on. What got me through those months wasn't toughness in the way people usually mean it. Gritted teeth, suppressed feeling, pushing through. It was something closer to clarity, knowing what I knew, reading what was in front of me, not letting the size of the moment convince me I had no options. That kind of clear-eyed steadiness, I've come to believe it's one of the most important things a person can build in themselves, quietly, over years, before they ever need it. You don't develop it in a crisis. You arrive at a crisis with it or you don't. And then there's what Elise did. She called me the morning after. She didn't have to. She had nothing to gain from it, and potentially something to lose. She did it because it was the right thing to do, and she knew it was the right thing to do, and that was enough for her. I have thought about that a lot, about how integrity isn't a big dramatic moment most of the time. It's a phone call you make when no one is watching. June is 14 months old now, and she walks like she's crossing a ship deck in rough weather. She falls and gets back up. Every single time. I watch her do it, and I think about what I want her to carry forward. Not money, not a name, not a version of events where her mother was a victim. I want her to carry the ability to read a room clearly, to know her own worth without needing someone else to confirm it, and to get back up from the floor with the same matter-of-fact determination she already has at 14 months old. Those three things, the courage to keep going, the honesty to see things as they are, and the integrity to do right even when it costs you. Nobody can put a number on those, and nobody can take them away once they're yours. Conrad offered me $2 million to disappear. What he didn't understand is that I had already been building something worth considerably more than that inside for years. He just handed me the resources to use it.